minimum wage.
35 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you on the True People's Radio. We're talking with Ravi Batra, the award-winning international New York Times best-selling author of numerous books, including my two favorites, Greenspan's Fraud, How 2 Decades of His Policies Have Undermined the Global Economy, and Ravi's most recent book, which is an absolute must-read, The New Golden Age, The Coming Revolution Against Political Corruption and Economic Chaos. His website, Ravi Batra, RAVIBATRA.com. He's also an economics professor of economics at Southern Methodist University at SMU. And Ravi, the bumper music, tongue-in-cheek, let's put Congress on the minimum wage, that's really the exact opposite of what needs to be done. We need to have the tide rising with regard to wages. You mentioned that just before we went into the break. I wanted you to just expand on that a little bit, exactly how we do that, and then we got a whole bunch of people who want to ask you questions.
And that's right. Wages have to rise because productivity has been rising for so many years that there's a lot of room for wages to catch up with high productivity. So wages can easily rise even in the current atmosphere because profits are still very, very high. So wages can still rise. And yet what you see from the Bush administration, they put so many conditions on General Motors that they have to lay off people and cut wages to become competitive and so on. That is just the wrong medicine. Now, the Obama administration is doing the same thing. They are saying GM has only 3 months to right its wrongs. Well, if you cut wages, demand will fall even more, and more people will be laid off. So that's not the right way to do. But also, something else has to be done at the same time, and that is to cut our trade deficit sharply, because that is connected to the low wages in the United States.
Yeah. And what's your...
And for that, we just fix our dollar to the Chinese currency, Japanese currency, and other countries that have huge trade surpluses with us. We fix the value of the dollar at a low rate with their currencies. That's all we need to do.
Can we? I thought that our currency was floating. I didn't realize that we could.
Well, we have to then change that regime. We instead of let it float, we have to make it fixed the way Chinese and the Japanese have done.
Would that cause the rest of the world to no longer use the dollar as a reserve currency? Would that cause them to no longer denominate, for example, gold and oil, particularly oil, in dollars?
Well, as I said earlier, the rest of the world cannot really let the dollar fall too much. Because we are still the biggest market for them.
Right.
So it is true that they would run away from the dollar. But okay, even if gold goes up, fine. The United States will then be able to export so much that it will be able to buy oil on its own.
Right. And just to put this in context, the U.S. economy is around a $14-15 trillion a year annual economy. China just became the third largest economy behind Japan with a little over $3 trillion. Japan is on the high end of $3 trillion. Germany's on the low end of $3 trillion. So we're still...
I mean, you can add Japan, China, and Germany, all three together, and still the U.S. is the largest economy.
That's right. So that's actually the good news, I suppose. Gus in Key Largo, Florida. You're on the air with Ravi Batra.
Hi, Robbie. I'm just calling to the way the economy is going and the wages are going. What is foreseeable for, the youth coming up today? My niece, her husband, my grandnephew, and my little 2-year-old niece.
Well, I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry. Hello?
Gus's question was with everything that you see on the horizon. He's got children, grandchildren, grandnieces. What kind of world are they going to inherit? What's the future of the American economy?
The future is very, very bright. See, I don't just look at the analysis of the economy. I also look at historical cycles. In terms of cycles of history, a very bright day is coming up because people are going to be so fed up with the status quo. They are going to demand big changes. At every election time, there will be changes in the coming future. I think George Bush, no matter how bad he has been, he has done us all a great service because he woke us all up to the excesses of monopoly capitalism. Otherwise, this would have been hidden for a long time, for way into the future, and low-wage economy would become permanent otherwise. So I think, yes, we have a chaos right now, but just within 2 to 3 years, because there will be another election in 2010, there will be big changes occurring that year. So the end result will be very, very good. I'm very optimistic for the future.
We just have to hold our breath here for a short while, for a
year.
Yeah,
in the short term, we have to prepare ourselves and also be active politically. I mean, let's not be complacent and suffer in silence.
Yeah, and that's Bernie Sanders, our last hour. That's my song. Get out there, get active, tag. It's you. So, Catherine in Monterey, California, you're on the air with Dr. Ravi Batra.
Good morning, Dr. Batra. I have a question for you about the meeting that was held in Washington, D.C. on September 14th last year of the G20. And in their resolutions that they formulated at that meeting, they said that they wanted to reform the Bretton Woods system, which was originally that the world was on the gold standard, and that now, since 1973, the dollar has been allowed to be not backed by anything. So what do you see as the likelihood of a change in that arena? Are we going to be required now to, or the G20, will they come up with a new standard? Is everybody going to be required to have a value behind the currency, like the dollar should be backed by some value?
I think they will have to do that.
Thank you,
right now, the current system is very friendly to the CEO. Anytime there is a problem, they print more money, bring interest rates down, create more debt, and goods get sold while wages remain low, and the CEO benefits. So when there is an actual collapse of the system, they will have to go to back to the gold standard, but I think most likely it will be a partial gold standard. Like we won't have to have $1 backed up by every dollar of gold, but maybe 25 to 40% of gold would be needed to back up the money in circulation. This will give us flexibility also to meet emergencies, but it won't be like what we have today. Anytime there's a problem, print more money and let the CEO prosper. It won't be like that. So we will have a partial gold standard in the future.
Yeah, interesting. Lewis in Portland, Oregon, listening on KPOJ. Lewis, you're on the air with Dr. Ravi Batra.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'll pass along a couple nuggets of good news, and then we'll ask a tough question. The first nugget of good news is all the money that isn't flowing into the market and all the money that isn't flowing into real estate and all those same things is interestingly being parked in short-term treasuries. Also, a vast majority, and I don't know if Robbie's ever seen a maturity schedule on the Chinese holdings, but probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 billion a year comes due, spread out over the year. So the Chinese may not be buying new bonds, but they're still here keeping their dropped value investment reinvested in the United States in dollars. And the question I have is, so if not the dollar, what security? Because there's no other security that's backed by a stable political and economic system that's one-third of the economic production in the United States and the whole world. Where would you go? You can't go to rubles, you can't go to the yuan, you can't go to the yen, because those economies aren't big enough, they don't have enough dollars. So if you leave the dollar, you create mini bubbles and you destroy yourself. So,
but isn't the euro, the European Union's combined GDP is close to that of the United States, isn't it, Lewis?
That's right. That's right.
But Tom, but the euro is a voluntarily, artificially created security. There is no full faith and credit of the taxpayers of any one of those countries behind the euro, and any of those countries can voluntarily opt out and not have the euro.
Yeah, you're right, and in fact, there's discussion among several of them of doing just that. Robbie, your thoughts on all this? Thank you, Lewis.
That's why I said the dollar will not collapse, will not crash, but its value will still go down because our debt with respect to the rest of the world is so much more than any other countries or any other zone's debt. We have a tremendous amount of debt, plus I think the gold will rise for a while. So people may not go to currency, they will turn to gold, and they always have in the past.
Right. So, excuse me. So as the dollar decreases in value, you'll see commodities go up.
Not all commodities, only gold and silver, precious commodities.
But the industrial commodities not because of the depression, as it were, because there's not a demand for them.
Because people are afraid of currencies. There is so much inflation of currencies, not inflation of prices, but inflation of currencies,
right,
that they will turn to gold. Now, oil, maybe there may be a different play at oil, because, again, here I'm relying on the cycles again. Oil could rise next year, or this year, I mean, because of the Middle East tensions. And that also will contribute to the rise in gold.
Interesting. Dr. Ravi Batra with us. RaviBatra.com is his website. He's the author of two of my favorite books. If you want to know anything about economics, if you want to be economically literate, get The New Golden Age and Greenspan's Fraud by Dr. Ravi Batra. RaviBatra.com. We'll be right back with your calls for Dr. Batra.